Hey, the release of a new Mario Kart is almost upon us, this time for the much maligned Wii U. So with that somewhat flimsy reason in mind, I decided to take a look at what I think are the 5 best alternatives to Nintendo's seminal karting series. I'm saying this from inside of a car because I thought it was somewhat relevant to the topic in hand, but I've just realised it makes me look like a bit of a Burk, so I'll just get out now.
Number 5. I'll be honest and say that many titles vied for 5th place on this list, but I ended up plumping for the lesser known Speed Freaks for the PlayStation, otherwise known as Speed Punks in the US. Developed by Funcom Dublin, the game allegedly took 2 years to finish, although when I picked up my copy for a couple of quid, it seemed all that time had been misspent. I found myself slipping and sliding like a jelly on ice, and believed this to be a game broken beyond repair. In actuality though, it's these very controls that make the game work. Most karting titles see you heavily weighted to the track with turns made with relative ease, but here almost every corner is a challenge and requires you to master the art of the power slide if you're to get anywhere near the lethal CPU opponents. All the tracks have also been perfectly designed around the controls, even if at times it's incredibly frustrating to get to grips with. It's one of those racing games where you find yourself clutching the pad and swaying uncontrollably side to side as you play.
Take my word for it, it's a good thing.
Even the weapons system has clearly had a lot of thought put into it. There's your standard arsenal such as missiles, bombs and slime, but what's notable is that you can dodge most of these if you're skillful enough. There's also an interesting boost setup that's reliant on pickups scattered around the circuits, and you can take advantage of a plethora of shortcuts if you're brave enough to explore. It's no higher in this list for a few reasons though, such as the fact that the cast of characters are of the unlovable disembodied limbed variety, and the difficulty curve can be a little too steep at times. There's also only 12 tracks, but the ones present are generally quite varied, ranging from beaches, fairgrounds and lava-strewn temples. They all look pretty good too, particularly for a PlayStation 1 title. I like Speed Freaks. It offers something a little different to most Mario Kart wannabes, and is well worth playing, especially as it can be brought to next to nothing nowadays. Number 4. Diddy Kong Racing. Who can forget Diddy Kong Racing? After all, it has a purple elephant with an outrageous Asian accent that flies around on a magic carpet, and a mouse called Pipsy. You don't forget stuff like that.
You just don't.
But in actual fact, one of the main criticisms of the game is that it's a little bland and forgettable next to its main rival, Mario Kart 64. A case in point being that the playable characters are all largely forgettable, although you are able to play as Conker before his steady decline into alcohol abuse. So despite putting this on the list instinctively, largely as I played it for hours when I was nothing but a sprog with just a Game Boy Pocket and N64 to his name, it's quite nice to see that after playing it for a few hours it still holds up quite well. I might even like it more now than I did back then. Developed by Rare on its infamous N64 golden streak of the late 90s, this bears all the hallmarks of a company in form. The main draw when it was released in 1997 is a single-player adventure mode. Seeing you driving around a large hub area with several tracks to race in and win, it was the first time the solo campaign in a karting title had been structured this way. You also had to defeat a boss character in the 4 main worlds. Yes, the story may have revolved around defeating an evil giant pig aptly called Whiz-Pig. With this and the elephant, I'm not sure I want to know what was going on during development, but it was almost effortlessly engrossing. Of course, things were helped by tight controls that are on par with Mario Kart, and the addition of planes is also very welcome, being a joy to swoop around corners with. Sure, the hovercraft's a pure floaty frustration, but it's still strange that Rare never made a game focused just on planes going from this game. Oh yeah, never mind. Still, Diddy Kong Racing never elevates beyond very good status due to its generally solid but sometimes uninspiring track design. There are highlights of course, but the game's main strengths come in other areas, like its upgradable weapon system. Grab a blue balloon and you can use it straight away for a standard turbo for example, or you can grab 2 more and utilise an ultra boost. The same 3-tier system is in place for an arsenal which includes missiles, shields, oil slicks and magnets. Another area in which DKR excels is the deceptively stiff challenge it has in store for the single player, namely the Silver Coin Challenge, where you have to collect 8 silver coins placed on each track, and come first while doing it. Having to complete Greenwood Village in this mode is something I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy, but damn is it satisfying when you pull it off. Ultimately, Diddy Kong Racing may not be the most electrifying karting game out there, but it's certainly one of the most solidly designed. Just be sure to steer clear of the slightly dodgy DS remake. Number 3. With an intro track like that, you might think, surely this game has to be great.
And you'd be right, it is.
Konami Crazy Racers was largely given the cold shoulder, or more accurately a slightly lukewarm one, when it was released in 2001. This was probably as a little game called Mario Kart Super Circuit was to be released in just 3 months' time, so most reviewers recommended people to wait for Nintendo's title to blow Konami's young pretender out of the water. But critics be damned, it's aged far better than you'd expect, and has a hyperactive sugar rush quality that's hard to dislike. Sure, it's arguably got all the depth of a slim fast addicted puddle, but there's no denying this is a game that's been made with a lot of love and care. The characters are hardly household names, but they're certainly an interesting bunch, and the tracks all have their individual quirks and are based around the races and the series from which they originate. A track that goes around a baseball field in homage to the MLB Power Pros games? Pitch perfect. A Castlevania level with bats and creepy unstable bridges? Scarily good. A Metal Gear Solid circuit with boxes and mines to avoid? Explosively enjoyable. Throw in some unique weapons, solid controls and varied challenges, gaining licenses by completing set tasks being a highlight, and you've got a karting title that's well worth a run around. In fact, it's probably the best portable alternative to Mario Kart that's out there, although Sonic Drift runs it pretty close.
Only joking, that game's rubbish.
Number 2. Yes, Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed is perhaps an obvious entry for this list, but when I originally thought up this top 5 idea I'd never actually played it, yet still assumed once I did it would claim top spot with ease. This was largely due to the wildly positive reception it received across the World Wide Web, and when I started it, it seemed to have everything going for it. Sumo Digital have clearly built on the solid foundations of Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, and have created an unhinged love letter to all that is Sega.
So it's with a heavy heart that I have to admit, it's far from perfect. But let's talk about the good stuff first, because trust me, there's a lot.
As stated, this is a game that wears its heart on its sleeve, with circuits designed with a meticulous approach to recreating specific Sega classics, be it Skies of Arcadia or Samba de Amigo. You race around these in vehicles that transform constantly from karts to hovercrafts to planes, with the terrain usually being changed from lap to lap too. Sometimes it seems the only way to keep up with some of the more brightly coloured tracks is to don some sunglasses and be constantly chugging away at a bottle of Sunny D. Fortunately, you'll likely just be playing with a smile on your face, as it's hard not to love a game with this much sheer enthusiasm. Sumo Digital clearly know what it's doing when it comes to crafting solid arcade races too. After all, it was behind the superlative Outrun 2006, Coast to Coast, and this is shown in the well-judged controls, which make power sliding to gain boosts a breeze. As mentioned earlier, the game does have some drawbacks though. Strangely enough, one is arguably its main strength, its arcade sensibilities. If you want a rock-solid, no-nonsense kart racer, you won't get it here. This is a colourful, hyperkinetic blur of a game. It doesn't know how to take it slow. As a result, it can wear you down and perhaps doesn't have the timeless appeal of the Mario Kart series. This probably isn't a title that you'll be playing for years to come, and not just because the online servers are dead. Other problems are that the boat sections are generally floaty and unsatisfying, and, more specifically, there's a weapon that temporarily reverses your controls. That idea should have been cast straight into the pit of Hades before it got anywhere near the final game.
Still, Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed takes an everything in the kitchen sink approach to karting in terms of modes, challenges, characters, vehicles and track design. And I for one applaud it for doing so.
And number 1 is... Crash Bandicoot has actually been the star of a few karting titles, and none of them could be called terrible, but it's his very first venture into driving that stands head and shoulders above the rest. It was developer Naughty Dog's last contribution to the Crash Bandicoot series, and it's not a bad way to go out. This is a game that was clearly designed to compete with, and not just clone, Mario Kart. The controls are near perfect, with power sliding requiring a good deal of skill to master. You also have the ability to gain turbos by jumping off the many gradients spread around the tracks. This means races have you constantly choosing whether to take the direct route or use the many ramps and inclines off the beaten path to get boosts, adding a real layer of depth to proceedings. It helps that the tracks are a varied bunch of course, and they act as decent fan service for those who love the original Crash trilogy to boot. This circuit gives me some occasionally unwelcome flashbacks to Slippery Climb from the original, for example. Weapons are also solid, and the ability to avoid most of them with defensive pickups is very welcome. This is something that many karting games fail to bring over from Mario Kart for some reason.
Ultimately, there's not much I can say that's wrong with Crash Team Racing, so as a result, it ends up top of this list. How's that for logical reasoning?
So that's my top 5 alternatives to Mario Kart. There's a good chance I missed your favourite in the list though, so feel free to lambast me in the comments section below if that's the case. The fun doesn't need to end here either. as I've assembled a short playlist of some of my favourite karting game music, and you can listen to that by clicking the link on the left. You can watch a summary of all the latest retro gaming news by clicking the link on the right too. Thanks for watching.
So I'll just get out now. No, I won't, because there's a car coming.
Can I help you further?